Do you know when, how, and why the bike routes on Page and Haze were decided on?
Yeah, I don't know the timing of that, but I know that Page and Haze Street were chosen as the bike route through that area far long ago, but they were really chosen as streets that frankly weren't as direct and convenient for people biking. In particular, Haze Street, heading westbound, goes up a hill and really is out of the way to get to the Panhandle. So it's really not a direct or even convenient connection between the Wiggle route and the Lower Haight and the Panhandle. So going way back, gosh, literally since the 90s, folks at the San Francisco Bicycle Coalition, neighbors, and people who bicycle through the area a lot have really been working to make Fell and Oak Streets the official bike routes. We were able to change from Haze Street to Fell Street, headed westbound years later, and that was a really good improvement. Fell Street's so important because it is a direct and relatively flat route. Again, compared to Haze Street where you have to go up a hill and several blocks out of your way, it really wasn't convenient and wasn't inviting for people on a bike. So a lot more people were riding on Fell Street to head westbound than Haze Street. So we worked really hard to get the city to change its official bike route status. That was one step. Then a much bigger step was actually adding bike lanes on the streets. Which, I mean, I could go on and talk a little bit about kind of how some of that's evolved.
Adding the bike lane? Sure.
Yeah. So it's been a long, painful process of getting bike improvements on that Fell and Oak Street piece. And just a reminder to people that we're talking about a relatively short stretch. It really is only 3 blocks between Scott and Baker on Fell Street and Oak Street. But it's a really critical 3 blocks. For anyone who bikes in the city and bikes in that area, you know that there are hills on either side, that it can be really daunting, not only to regular bicyclists, but especially to a new bicyclist or someone who's a prospect. And we think a lot about whether it be kids, families, older folks, people who just may be slower or maybe a little less confident on a bicycle. You really don't want to be sending them up and over a hill and out of their way. It's not an inviting way to ride. At the same time, you don't want to be sending them on a super fast street with no dedicated bikeway. But that's what the city was doing for years and years and years. So we've been advocating really strongly at the San Francisco Bicycle Coalition to add bike lanes on Fell Street and Oak Street. The Fell Street campaign has been much longer and much higher priority for many, many years. But Oak Street has really been growing as a priority and is really now seen as the perfect couplet for going eastbound on that area. So years ago, a Fell Street bike lane was added, but frankly it was pretty inadequate. It was very narrow. You're riding, frankly, right in the door zone of the parked cars that are there. You're riding next to really fast-moving traffic, and for anyone that knows Fell Street, they know it's a fast-moving arterial. People speed in their cars there. There's a real speed problem, which is also a pedestrian safety problem, in addition to a bicycle safety problem, in addition to a driver safety problem. So we'd really love to see traffic coming through the whole area. But over many, many years, both through advocacy at the Bicycle Coalition, through political leadership, through advocates who just have really worked hard on their own in the community, there's been a real change of thinking about the importance of Fell and Oak. And I think people have realized, especially decision makers have come to understand, that this really is a critical bike connection and that there need to be improvements made. So the green paint was added on Fell Street just a couple years ago. A few improvements here and there were added on Fell Street, especially connecting to the Wiggle area to the Fell Street bike lane have been some big improvements, but it's still not good enough. What we have on Fell Street is definitely not an 8 to 80 level safe project or safe area. And we think about bike lanes, we really think about the bike network needing to be 8 to 80 friendly, meaning you could bring an 8-year-old or an 80-year-old out, riding at their own speed, their own comfort level, and they would feel safe and confident biking there. For a street like Fell and like Oak Street also, that's so fast-moving traffic, you've got to have physically separated bikeways. There's no other way that we can really securely be inviting people out. Come join us, try biking, ride to Golden Gate Park, ride out to the museums, ride to the beach, come back to the neighborhoods without there being a physically separated bikeway there. So the real push now is to make sure that there is a great connection there, that it is physically separated, that it is a family-friendly bikeway.
Do you know how many signatures and letters have been written in favor of the bike lanes?
Yeah, I'm really proud that we've gathered more than 250 letters of support. These are people who live in the neighborhood, who work in the neighborhood, or maybe who just ride through the neighborhood. Some of them don't bike at all, They're people who walk, they drive, they take the bus, but they understand the importance of a safer bikeway and a safer street overall. So 250 letters have been sent to Mayor Lee and other decision makers here in the city, urging them to create physically separated bikeways on both Fell and Oak Street by the end of this year, by the end of 2012. And that's really important. I think we're seeing growing commitment from city decision makers to improve this area, but we're not seeing the urgency we need yet. We're not seeing the quick response time that we need. We were really pushing hard for these bikeways to be down by the spring. Doesn't look possible, unfortunately. We're now saying let's get it at least by this fall of 2012. So that's really, I think, the latest the city should be doing these improvements, given how important they are in terms of safety improvements, given how important they are in terms of the city reaching its goal of 20% of trips by bicycle by the year 2020. If we can't improve these 3 blocks on a major bikeway that's already so popular with people biking, what does that mean for the rest of the city and for the city's commitment to reaching its bike-friendly goals?
So initially the city had proposed a pilot project that would start this year. Do you know why that was scrapped?
They've been a little, confusing in timing. I think we've heard different things from different people, so I'd suggest, finding out more from them about the why and how. Yeah. I don't want to speak for them or guess at that. Yeah.
Have you heard any complaints from people having their parking removed?
Yeah. There's a huge number of people who want to see both these streets improved for better biking, for pedestrian safety. You also have a vocal minority of people who are opposing the bike safety projects. Unfortunately, they're concerned about moving the parking. This is public parking, it's on-street parking that is not dedicated to any specific neighbors or residents or businesses. It's public parking with regular turnover. In order to make this project feasible, you've got a couple different options, but the city studied it and recommended that the parking removal to make the room for the bikeway is the best option. And we think that is the best way to go at this point. Unfortunately, there has been some vocal opposition. It's not a large number of people, but definitely vocal about concerns about parking removal. And we understand, that is a big concern in the city. It's something that often, can be a stumbling block. What we're really looking to do is help the city show fortitude and commitment towards its safety priorities. This really is a decision about safety versus perceived convenience. With the parking spaces, there's going to be a perceived convenience change there. People will perceive it's harder to park. The reality is it may not be harder to park because the city is looking to replace some of that parking, and they likely will be able to replace much of the parking in nearby areas within walking distance. But the truth is these parking spaces were never dedicated to specific individuals. So when people are looking for parking, they're always going to be looking in different locations. So I think it's important to clarify that the sense of entitlement to these spaces, I think, is a little perhaps over-exaggerated. What we're really asking the city to do is prioritize safety. There's a known safety problem there for people biking and walking. We know there's a safety problem there for people biking and walking. We're asking the city to put that priority ahead of the perceived parking challenges in the neighborhood.
And as the city moves forward with their goal of 20% by 2020, how do you see the trade-offs between creating safer routes for cyclists versus possibly increasing congestion and removing parking? How do we move forward to create a more sustainable city? Looking at those challenges.
Yeah, I think the evidence of can I restate that? I think city leaders should feel very confident in the evidence of the last 5 years. Bicycling in San Francisco has increased 71% in the last 5 years. It's an amazing number, really proud of that. And the reason that's come about is that there has been real encouragement for more people to bike, and there have been physical changes on the street. Just in the last year and a half, the city has added nearly 20 miles of new bikeways on the street, and that's fantastic. Now we want to see more of those upgraded to really the 8 to 80 standard so that they are physically separated, they are more family friendly and welcoming and safe for people of all skill levels and ages. But what we see is when you build it, they come. When you build safe, dedicated, inviting bikeways, more people bicycle. The proof is in the pudding on Market Street, where we have the green, dedicated, separated bikeways in the mid-market area. You see it on Division Street, on Alamany. These are all streets where physically separated bikeways have been added recently. And you see it every single time that when there's dedicated space, more people choose to bike. So we know we can reach those numbers if we invest in the bike space. And what this means for people who are never going to bike, and of course there are going to be folks who never bike, and that's okay, but their quality of lives are going to improve as well. That's going to mean less people out on the road with them driving, less competition, frankly, for parking spaces, less congestion on the buses. We know that some of the bus lines, and frankly, many of the bus lines that are paralleling the very busy bike routes, like Market Street, like the Wiggle, a lot of those bus routes are really crowded right now. Buses are passing people by, they're having to wait. If more folks are able to take their bikes, it leaves more room on the buses for those who really want to take the bus and who physically may not be able to bike. So we really see this as a win-win for everyone in the city, even those who are never going to get on a bike.